They truly love you if they do these 7 things. The meeting of 2 personalities is like the contact of 2 chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. Carl Jung. At Spiritual Wisdom, we believe love is more than words. It's transformation in motion. In today's video, we'll uncover 7 hidden signs that reveal when someone truly loves you, based on the profound insights of Carl Jung. These subtle but powerful behaviors often go unnoticed, yet they speak volumes about the depth of a soul connection. As you listen, reflect on your own relationships. Do you recognize these signs in someone's actions toward you? Or have you shown them without even realizing it? Comment below if any of these signs resonate with you. And don't forget to share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Let's grow in love, awareness, and spiritual truth together. 1. Mirroring your behavior. When someone truly loves you, their soul begins to speak a quiet language, one that doesn't require words, but reveals itself through subtle, unconscious behaviors. One of the clearest signs of this deeper connection is mirroring. This isn't about copying or pretending. It's an involuntary reflection of emotional closeness. When a person is genuinely bonded with you, their subconscious begins to align with yours. You may find that they adopt your gestures, match your tone of voice, or even start to take an interest in the things you care about, not because they are trying to impress you, but because their soul is resonating with yours. This synchronization is not calculated. It flows naturally, often without either person realizing it. Carl Jung believed that true connection happens beyond the surface, in the realm of the unconscious mind. He saw love not just as an emotion, but as an energetic mirror, where 2 people reflect each other's essence. When someone mirrors your behavior, it's often the soul's silent way of saying, "I feel safe here. I recognize you." This happens through mirror neurons in the brain, which activate when we feel empathy or emotional closeness. But spiritually, it signals something more powerful, a merging of internal rhythms. The person who mirrors your energy is not simply reacting. They are synchronizing. They're not just hearing your words, they're feeling your emotional landscape. Over time, this kind of soul-level connection begins to shape how 2 people move through the world together. Their shared energy becomes a dance, subtle, intuitive, and sacred. You may notice that when you're down, they grow quiet too. When you laugh, their body relaxes. When you dream aloud, they support your vision like it's their own. This isn't performance, it's presence. Real love doesn't just listen, it feels with you. It doesn't echo out of politeness, but out of resonance. This kind of love doesn't seek control or perfection. It thrives in authenticity. And so, mirroring becomes more than a psychological concept. It becomes a spiritual signpost, revealing where the souls have begun to intertwine. True love reveals itself in the little things, not just in grand gestures or poetic words, but in how 2 energies begin to align when they are emotionally safe. A person who mirrors you with sincerity and softness is not just interested in your personality, they're attuned to your soul. They carry your emotions with care, not because they're trying to win you, but because some part of them already feels like home in your presence. This kind of mirroring cannot be faked, forced, or fabricated. It is the byproduct of emotional integrity and inner truth. And when you notice it, pause for a moment, not to overanalyze it, but to honor it. because their soul is saying what their words might never say aloud. I'm with you, even in silence. Have you ever noticed someone subtly mirroring your gestures or tone? If so, share your story in the comments so we can explore this soulful connection together. If not, comment, I'll observe, and let's begin this journey of emotional awareness side by side. 2. Pulling away emotionally. When someone starts pulling away emotionally, it's easy to assume they've lost interest or no longer care. But according to Carl Jung, that withdrawal can actually signal something far more complex and vulnerable. Emotional distance is often not a sign of indifference. It's a signal of fear rising from the unconscious. Jung's concept of the shadow self explains that we all carry hidden wounds, repressed fears, and unresolved emotions within us. And when love becomes too real or too deep, it can awaken those buried parts. The very act of being truly seen, loved, and emotionally exposed can cause a person to retreat, not because they don't feel, but because they feel too much and haven't yet built the capacity to hold it. When love touches the soul in ways that are unfamiliar or intense, it triggers internal conflict between the desire for connection and the instinct for protection. Picture a man in his 50s who has always been the strong, silent type, high-functioning, responsible, maybe even admired for his composure. He meets someone who gently disarms his defenses. She listens, sees beyond his surface, and doesn't demand that he perform or impress. For a brief period, he allows himself to relax into her presence. But suddenly, he grows quiet. He answers less frequently, becomes colder, more distant. Most would interpret this as a sign of fading interest. But beneath the surface, his soul is in turmoil. Carl Jung would say his shadow has been activated. Deep emotional safety has stirred unconscious fears of vulnerability, abandonment, or not being enough. He isn't retreating because he feels less. He's retreating because he's overwhelmed by feeling more than he knows how to process. The love has touched old wounds, and without the tools to heal them, his psyche falls back into the patterns it knows: emotional withdrawal, silence, escape. Understanding this pattern changes how you interpret emotional distance. Instead of blaming yourself or rushing to fill the space, you can begin to see it as a psychological process. Carl Jung famously said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Many people live out emotional patterns they don't understand, unconsciously repeating what feels safe, even if it sabotages the very thing they crave. So when someone pulls away, it's not always a lack of love. It might be the presence of something deeper, something spiritual, something awakening. Your love may have stirred their soul in ways that defy logic or language. In fact, emotional withdrawal can sometimes be a backhanded compliment. It means you've touched something real, something sacred, something that demands healing. Still, this doesn't mean you should chase or beg. Instead, allow space with wisdom. Give them room to meet their own soul. And if you are the one who's pulling away, don't run. Stay, breathe, observe. Ask yourself, what part of you is afraid of being loved? Is it your belief that you're unworthy? That you'll be left? That if they see the real you, they'll leave? These questions aren't easy, but they are necessary. Jung's work reminds us that love is not just about harmony, it's about transformation. And transformation often begins when we confront the shadows that love brings to light. If someone truly loves you, but pulls away, they may not need to love you less. They may need to learn how to love themselves more in your presence. And that is a sacred soul journey only they can walk. 3. Playful teasing and banter. When someone truly loves you, they might not come out and say it in grand declarations. Instead, they reveal it in playful teasing, subtle banter, and light provocation that lingers in your memory long after the moment has passed. What may seem like harmless jokes or quick-witted remarks is often their soul's quiet way of staying close to you without exposing the full depth of their emotions. Carl Jung believed the unconscious mind finds creative ways to express what the conscious mind fears to say. That's why this kind of teasing becomes a spiritual language, one that allows connection without vulnerability, affection without pressure. It's not just flirtation, it's a protective shell for something deeper. Humor, in this case, isn't simply entertainment. It's intimacy in disguise, a form of emotional resonance that can only exist when someone feels safe enough with your energy to playfully test its boundaries. If they're always the first to notice your habits and turn them into light jokes, if their eyes brighten just before they tease you, if they remember things you thought were insignificant and bring them up in moments of laughter, these are not random gestures. They are spiritual clues. Their teasing is consistent, personal, and never cruel. It's the kind that makes you feel seen, remembered, even cherished in a quiet way. Behind each quip is a silent message. I care enough to pay attention. This kind of humor builds a world where only the two of you exist, where emotional distance is closed by shared smiles and witty exchanges. And when you look closer, you'll realize their laughter carries a kind of longing, the longing to be close without risking rejection. It's how their soul reaches out when words fall short. Jung once said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." And this is precisely what happens during playful banter between two connected souls. It's not about who's funnier. It's about who feels spiritually safe enough to be playful with you. The teasing becomes a ritual, a familiar rhythm that draws you in and lets your guard down. In a world that often masks true emotions, this kind of dynamic is rare. It's spiritual intimacy wrapped in humor, a quiet rebellion against the fear of vulnerability. When someone uses humor to stay close, what they're really saying is, "You matter enough for me to risk the edge of my comfort zone." So when they mimic your tone, exaggerate your habits, or poke fun at your routines with that unmistakable glimmer in their eyes, understand that it's not just for laughs. It's their unconscious soul speaking directly to yours, using humor as a bridge to connection. This energy isn't random. It's spiritual, deliberate, and emotionally charged. The banter becomes a dance between familiarity and desire, safety and closeness, spirit and self. If you're present enough to notice, you'll realize this is how love often introduces itself, not loudly, but playfully, through the sacred language of laughter. If you've ever wondered why someone teases you more than they talk seriously, this video might reveal what's really going on beneath the surface. If that hits home, please like, subscribe, and help support the channel. 4. Remembering small details. When someone remembers the little things you say, like the way you take your coffee, the story you told once about a song that moved you, or a random joke you thought they'd forget, it's not just a sign of good memory. It's a reflection of deep emotional imprinting, a sign that your presence has settled into the quiet spaces of their mind. According to Carl Jung, the soul absorbs what the conscious mind often overlooks, and love, rooted in the soul, doesn't scream it remembers. This kind of attentiveness doesn't come from obligation or habit. It comes from a quiet reverence for who you are. You live in their unconscious, not as a task to recall, but as a truth they carry. When a man brings up a detail you shared long ago, he's not trying to flatter you. He's revealing that you've become part of his inner world, the kind of world that doesn't lie. Love at the soul level doesn't parade itself. It shows up in the subtleties. A spiritually grounded man doesn't need to say, "I love you," every day. He shows it by how carefully he listens, how he remembers, and how he makes you feel seen without needing a reason. These are not grand performances. They are sacred signals. And this is what Jung meant when he spoke of unconscious communication, the soul reaching out without words, creating an invisible bridge between two lives. It's not about sentimentality or sweet talk. It's about resonance. These micro moments of remembrance become proof that your presence isn't temporary. It's living, echoing in the background of his life. And when a man holds you in this way, it's not something he controls, it's something that simply is. This spiritual attentiveness is a rare and beautiful language that doesn't need translation. You can feel it when it's real. He doesn't just recall what you said, he stores it like something sacred, returning to it not because he's obligated, but because it moved him. That's not just love. It's a soulful connection. It's the energy of someone whose inner world has shifted to make room for you. And that shift is never loud, but always honest. Jung would argue that such remembering isn't even conscious. It's instinctual, archetypal, the soul's way of recognizing what matters. And when someone holds space for you in that way, it's because your existence has touched something in them that logic can't define. So when you see a man, recall something you once said in passing, something even you may have forgotten, realize that you've become part of the architecture of his emotional world. You're not background noise. You're the silent music he carries. This is not a love that begs to be seen. It's a love that sees you, even when you're not looking. And in a world that's loud with performance and pretense, this kind of soul-level remembering is not just rare. It's the most powerful sign that you are loved in the way that truly transforms. If someone has ever remembered a tiny detail about you and it warmed your heart, this video is for you. Leave a like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss powerful content like this. Comment below. I deserve a love that remembers even the little things. 5. Watching you when you're not looking. When someone truly loves you, they often don't say it out loud. They show it in moments so quiet and subtle that most people miss them. One of the clearest signs is when they watch you when you're not looking, not with curiosity, but with presence and emotion they don't know how to put into words. Their eyes linger, not out of habit, but out of something deeper, something soulful. Carl Jung taught that the unconscious reveals itself in the smallest behaviors, especially in what the eyes silently communicate. When someone gazes at you during your unguarded moments, laughing at a joke, sipping coffee, scrolling through your phone, they're not just observing, they're connecting. In that stillness, their soul is responding to yours, often without them even realizing it. This kind of attention is rare in a distracted world where eye contact is often replaced with scrolling and multitasking. So when a person looks at you like you're the only thing that matters in the room, it's because you've touched something sacred in them. Carl Jung believed that true love goes beyond words. It lives in the unconscious, in those tiny gestures that aren't filtered or planned. And when someone watches you like this, especially when you're unaware, it reveals a profound emotional attachment they might not be ready to confess. Think about the man who waits at the train station, seeing his partner off to work. He doesn't say anything poetic or dramatic. He just watches as she walks away, catching the way her hair moves in the wind, how she adjusts her bag, how she turns to smile at someone else, and he takes it all in like it's a moment worth remembering. That's not routine. That's reverence. That's love, unspoken, but deeply felt. And in those moments, even if he doesn't admit it, his soul has already said, "I love you." This kind of love doesn't demand to be seen. It chooses to see. The watching isn't controlling or obsessive. It's soft, respectful, almost spiritual in nature. It happens when someone's inner world is moved by your very existence. They're not reacting to how you look or what you say. They're responding to the energy you carry, the essence of who you are. Jung's wisdom reminds us that we're all wired with unconscious patterns, and when someone's gaze keeps returning to you, even without effort, it's often because something in their psyche is drawn to yours, beyond logic or reason. It's easy to overlook these signs, especially if you've grown used to loud expressions of affection. But the people who truly love you are often the ones who say the least and feel the most. Their quiet glances speak volumes. Their eyes betray emotions their mouths can't form. They remember how you looked in the sunlight, how your face softened while lost in thought, how your laugh echoed during a moment of joy, and they hold on to it like a treasure. Carl Jung would say that their soul is recognizing something familiar in yours, something ancient, something meant. Love, in its purest form, isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's simply in the way someone sees you when you're not even trying to be seen. 6. Deep, intentional listening. When someone truly loves you, they listen with more than just their ears. They listen with their presence, their intuition, and their soul. They're not waiting for their turn to speak, nor are they distracted or half engaged. They're attuned to your emotional frequency in a way that feels almost spiritual, picking up on the subtle tremble in your voice, the pause before your sentence ends, or the silence that says more than words ever could. They remember the details you barely remember saying, the offhand comment you made about your childhood fear, the dream you whispered in a moment of vulnerability, or the shift in your tone when you speak about someone who hurt you. They respond to your heart, not just your words. This kind of listening is sacred. It is not about problem solving or offering quick advice. It's about offering a space where your soul can exhale and be known without judgment. Carl Jung once said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." When someone listens deeply to you, you begin to change. You begin to feel safe enough to unfold, layer by layer, without needing to perform or protect yourself. Their love becomes a container for your truth, and their silence becomes a sanctuary for your unspoken thoughts. You feel seen even in your mess, understood even in your confusion. They catch your emotions before you name them. They notice the shadows behind your smile, and they ask about what you don't say, not to pry, but because they care enough to want to understand the parts of you that the world often overlooks. Their listening is a mirror that reflects your spiritual essence back to you, not as broken or fragile, but as worthy, whole, and sacred. In a world that values noise over stillness, where conversations are often rushed and shallow, this kind of attention is rare and transformative. It's not just emotional intelligence, it's spiritual alignment. Their ability to hold space for you without fixing or controlling is proof of their emotional maturity and inner depth. You may find that their presence alone calms your nervous system, that just by being near them, your heart settles into a rhythm of trust. They don't need dramatic gestures to prove their love, because their daily attentiveness is louder than any declaration. They are present for the ordinary and the overlooked. They make you feel like what you say matters not just because they love you, but because your soul speaks a language they've chosen to learn. And when love listens this way, it heals. It teaches you how to be open without fear, how to trust without proof, and how to speak your truth without shrinking. This is love in its purest form, not performative, not possessive, but deeply spiritual. So if you find someone who listens like this, who hears you even in silence, who waits for your heart to be ready, hold on to them. Their love is not loud, but it is unwavering. And in a world that rarely listens, that kind of soul is a rare and sacred gift. Have you ever experienced someone truly listening to your soul, catching the words you didn't say? If so, share your story in the comments so others can feel inspired. If not, comment, "I'm ready to listen deeper," and let's begin this soulful journey together. 7. Small acts of care and presence. True love reveals itself not in declarations or drama, but in the unnoticed moments when someone consistently chooses your well-being over their convenience. When a person checks in on you just to hear your voice, adjusts the room temperature so you're comfortable, or silently offers you their coat when you didn't ask. These aren't just nice gestures. They are spiritual signs of a soul attuned to yours. Carl Jung understood love as a psychic connection rooted in the unconscious. And in these quiet actions, we see that truth come to life. Real love is not performative. It's intuitive. It doesn't need reminders, rules, or rehearsals. It knows when to show up, how to support, and where to stand even when words fail. This kind of love listens to your silence, holds your anxiety with gentleness, and recognizes your fatigue in a single glance. It doesn't wait for you to break down before offering help. It senses the tension in your breath and chooses to stay close, not to rescue, but to be present. When someone genuinely loves you, they don't need to be the hero of your story. They're content being the quiet strength in the background, the one who remembers how you like your coffee or how you withdraw when you're overwhelmed, and they adjust themselves accordingly, not to gain favor, but because their soul is in rhythm with yours. There is a sacred simplicity to how love operates, when it comes from a spiritually mature place. These small acts may look ordinary, but they're woven with deep meaning. A person who truly loves you doesn't try to change your mood with distractions. They sit in the storm with you. They won't tell you to cheer up when your soul is grieving. They'll hold the space for your sadness without judgment. Jung believed the soul speaks in symbols and patterns, and love, when real, becomes a pattern of consistency, kindness, and subtle depth. It shows up in the way someone notices you're emotionally drained before you say a word, or how they instinctively adjust their tone to match your emotional state. Love like this is not loud, but its silence is full. And though society often teaches men to express love through achievements or declarations, the deeper truth is that spiritual connection speaks in presence. It's not how often they say, "I love you," but how often they act like it when no one is watching. When someone's soul loves you, they remember the little things: your favorite meal, your quiet habits, the way you process pain, and they respond with care that feels effortless but is rooted in deep observation. You don't have to ask for reassurance because their energy is already speaking it. You don't have to explain your fears because they've already made space for them. This kind of love is not based on conditions or performance. It's rooted in devotion, in the spiritual decision to see you, honor you, and walk beside you with a quiet strength. In every silent act of care, you are not just receiving affection, you are witnessing the language of the soul, translated into action. That is love in its purest, most enduring form. If this message has touched your soul, comment below. I believe in love that shows up in the little things. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell to keep receiving content that nourishes your heart and spirit. Thank you for spending this time with us on Spiritual Wisdom. As we've explored today, love often reveals itself in the smallest, most unexpected ways through quiet presence, deep attention, and the kind of understanding that transcends words. According to Carl Jung, the signs of true love often arise from the unconscious, subtle, but powerful, invisible, yet deeply felt. If any of these hidden signs resonated with you, take a moment to reflect on the connections in your life that may be more meaningful than they appear. If you found this message valuable, please like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear this, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next journey into the deeper truths of the soul. Until next time, stay grounded, stay open, and stay connected to the wisdom within. The moment an empath snaps, Carl Jung warns narcissists about this power shift. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Carl Jung. This powerful quote holds the key to a radical transformation, especially for empaths who've endured the emotional storms created by narcissists. What if the very thing that once made you an easy target, your deep sensitivity, could actually become your greatest strength? In today's video from Spiritual Wisdom, we're diving into the exact moment when an empath snaps and why Carl Jung warned narcissists about this inevitable power shift. This isn't just theory, it's a life-changing shift you can apply today to reclaim your peace, your power, and your purpose. Have you ever reached that breaking point where everything changed? Drop a comment below and share your story. Your insight might empower someone else on their journey. Let's grow together. 1. Empathy becomes power when the shadow is integrated. For spiritually sensitive men between the ages of 30 and 65, there's often a moment quiet but earth-shattering when they realize that their empathy, long viewed as a weakness or liability, is actually a latent form of spiritual power. Jung believed that empathy becomes true power only when the shadow of the repressed parts of oneself, especially anger, assertiveness, and boundaries, is finally acknowledged and integrated. Many empaths, especially men raised in environments where vulnerability was shamed or seen as weakness, suppress these traits in the name of peace. But spiritual awakening begins the moment you stop betraying yourself to keep others comfortable. When you confront the shadow, your empathy is no longer used against you by narcissists. It becomes a tool of spiritual discernment, a force that sees through manipulation with surgical precision. It's like flipping a switch. The man who once internalized guilt and confusion now radiates calm authority, not through domination, but through inner alignment. In today's world, where emotional manipulation can come disguised as love, loyalty, or leadership, understanding the dynamics between empaths and narcissists isn't just psychological, it's spiritual survival. The man who integrates his shadow is no longer easy prey. He's spiritually awake, grounded, and unfazed by the drama that once drained him. He doesn't seek revenge. He no longer needs validation. His very presence becomes uncomfortable for narcissists, not because he attacks them, but because he can no longer be controlled by them. He doesn't react, he responds. He doesn't collapse, he observes. And most importantly, he no longer sees his empathy as a burden, but as a finely tuned radar for truth. This transformation isn't about becoming cold, it's about becoming real. And in becoming real, he becomes untouchable. So the real question becomes, what parts of your emotional life have you buried to keep yourself safe? And how would your life change if you brought those parts home, not as enemies, but as allies? Carl Jung not only offered psychological insight, he also pointed the way to spiritual liberation. Integrating with your shadow doesn't make you less of a man. It makes you whole. And when a whole man walks into a room, everything changes. This is the spiritual power shift Jung warned about. Not explosive, not dramatic, but deeply felt by everyone in its presence. If you're ready to stop being manipulated, then start by reclaiming the parts of yourself you've abandoned. That's where true power lies, not in pretending to be invulnerable, but in becoming spiritually indivisible. Comment below. I'm up for this journey. 2. Narcissists and empaths share the same core wound. What Carl Jung revealed about the shared wound between narcissists and empaths is both profound and liberating. And once you truly grasp it, your journey towards spiritual growth begins to transform everything. You see, at first glance, narcissists and empaths may seem like opposites. One appears selfish and self-absorbed, the other selfless and giving. But Jung's insight cuts deeper. He believed that both are actually disconnected from their true selves. Narcissists construct inflated, grandiose identities to mask inner pain, while empaths, often unconsciously, go to great lengths to serve, heal, or fix others, hoping to find love or validation in the process. And while these strategies look different on the outside, they stem from the same root and unresolved core wound. It's the wound of abandonment, of rejection, of not feeling seen or worthy simply for existing. Have you ever caught yourself bending over backwards for someone who didn't reciprocate, only to later feel resentment and emptiness? That moment holds a mirror to this truth. Both the narcissist and the empath are seeking a sense of wholeness, but in ways that betray their authentic selves. Let me tell you a story about a woman named Ava. She was the classic empath, always available, always accommodating, always giving. At work, she was the one staying late to help others. At home, she carried everyone's emotional burdens. She wore her compassion like armor, but inside, she was exhausted and silently screaming. One day, after another painful relationship with someone who emotionally manipulated her, she snapped not with anger, but with awakening. She started asking herself, why do I feel responsible for everyone else's feelings? Who taught me that love means self-sacrifice? And that moment, that question, marked the beginning of her spiritual awakening. She realized that her empathy had become a survival mechanism, a beautiful gift turned into a shield. And as she began healing her own wound, she no longer attracted narcissists. Why? Because she stopped playing the role they needed. She didn't become bitter or cold. She became real. Just like Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. So let me ask you, where in your life have you mistaken people-pleasing for love? Where have you hidden your true self just to avoid rejection? The beauty of this understanding is that it shatters the illusion that empaths are helpless victims and narcissists are powerful villains. Once you understand the common wound, you take back your agency. You begin to see your empathy not as a weakness, but as a spiritual tool, one that, when rooted in self-love, becomes a force of insight and protection. This is how true spiritual growth happens. You stop trying to rescue others and start rescuing the parts of yourself that you have long abandoned. So the next time you feel agitated or drained in a relationship, ask yourself, am I being true to myself right now? That question can change the power dynamics in any situation. Because when an empath heals, they not only escape toxic cycles, they transcend them. And that, my friend, is the moment when a true narcissist fears not your anger, but your awakening. Comment below. I choose to awaken. 3. Empaths are targeted because of shadow projections. Let me ask you something. Have you ever wondered why empaths seem to be magnets for narcissists? It's not random, and it's not because you're weak. In fact, it's the opposite. You see, according to spiritual wisdom and the teachings of Carl Jung, the real reason empaths are often targeted is because of a psychological phenomenon called shadow projection. Empaths, by nature, are deeply sensitive and attuned to the emotional frequencies of others, often prioritizing peace and harmony over conflict. But here's the spiritual trap. Because empaths suppress their own assertiveness, their inner strength, and their right to set boundaries, they unconsciously project those very qualities onto narcissists. The narcissist, in turn, appears powerful, confident, and self-assured, all the things the empath believes they lack but secretly possess. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." This couldn't be truer. when it comes to the empath-narcissist dynamic. Empaths aren't just victims. They're unconsciously drawn to narcissists because they sense, at a deep level, something missing in themselves. But that something isn't missing. It's just buried. It's repressed. It's sitting quietly in the shadow, waiting to be claimed. And here's where the real power shift happens. The moment an empath awakens and reclaims those disowned traits, their strength, their voice, their truth, the narcissist's hold begins to crack. The spiritual wisdom here is that your healing doesn't begin when the narcissist changes. It begins when you stop outsourcing your power and start owning every part of who you are, even the parts you've been taught to hide. Let's break this down even further. Think about this. Why do narcissists trigger empaths so deeply? Is it because of what the narcissist does, or because of what the empath suppresses? Carl Jung's concept of the shadow teaches us that what we deny in ourselves, we end up seeing in others. So when an empath meets someone who is unapologetically bold, demanding, and self-centered, it stirs something uncomfortable within them, not just disgust, but also envy and curiosity. That discomfort is the shadow knocking. The narcissist becomes a mirror, reflecting back to the empath not just toxicity, but also their hidden potential. Isn't it ironic that the very people who try to dominate you actually end up being the ones who reveal your deepest source of power? And once that realization sinks in, everything changes. The empath stops walking on eggshells. They speak up. They stop apologizing for existing. They stop rescuing people who are committed to misunderstanding them. They no longer view kindness as weakness or boundaries as betrayal. That's when narcissists panic. Because a spiritually awakened empath who has reclaimed their shadow is no longer energetically compatible with manipulation. They become unshakable, self-aware, and grounded in their truth. And let me tell you, there is nothing more terrifying to a narcissist than someone who sees through their game and refuses to play along. So here's the question I want to leave you with. What parts of yourself have you disowned? And who in your life has been reflecting them back to you? Are you ready to reclaim those parts? Not out of vengeance, but out of spiritual wisdom and self-respect? Because when you do, you won't just heal, you'll evolve. And the chains of manipulation will fall off not with noise, but with silence, with certainty, with a new level of consciousness that Carl Jung would say marks the true beginning of individuation. Remember, you are not here to be consumed by others' projections. You are here to become whole. And when you do, the narcissist no longer sees prey. They see power. If this resonates with you, consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell. Your journey to stoic self-mastery and victory continues with each lesson. 4. The turning point. You're not responsible for others' emotions. There comes a defining moment in a man's spiritual awakening when he realizes, perhaps for the very first time, that he is not responsible for how others feel. Let that settle for a second. You are not the emotional caretaker of every room you enter, and your worth is not measured by how well you absorb others' pain. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." But part of that acceptance means letting go of the unconscious guilt that has kept so many empathic men like you locked in a cycle of pleasing others at the cost of their own peace. This is not about becoming cold or indifferent. It's about understanding boundaries, and in doing so, building a psychological shield that protects your compassion from being weaponized. Narcissists thrive on guilt, on the belief that if they're upset, you must be the one to fix it. But the moment you stop dancing to their emotional chaos, you shift the power. That's the turning point. And it's not a loud declaration. It's quiet, spiritual, and deeply rooted in inner strength. In modern life, this plays out in subtle but soul-draining ways, like constantly being the one to smooth over family tensions, over-explaining your intentions at work, or allowing friends and partners to guilt-trip you for having needs of your own. You might recognize this pattern if you've ever walked away from a conversation feeling like you betrayed yourself just to keep the peace. But here's the truth. Self-sacrifice is not the same as love, and self-abandonment is not the same as empathy. When you begin to honor your own emotional sovereignty, a spiritual transformation takes place. You begin to see manipulation for what it is, an attempt to control your light because someone else hasn't cultivated their own. The more you reclaim your center, the less reactive you become to guilt, blame, and emotional projection. This is not arrogance, it's maturity. You can still be kind, generous, and spiritually grounded, but now it comes from a place of choice, not obligation. That's what true power feels like. So let me ask you this. How many times have you taken responsibility for someone else's emotional storm, thinking it was your job to calm it down? And how much of your life have you spent putting out fires you didn't start? The moment you realize you're not the emotional gatekeeper to someone else's dysfunction, you awaken something fierce and immutable inside. That's when the narcissist's game falls apart, because it only works on people who believe they are the problem. Don't fall for it. This isn't just psychological growth. It's spiritual growth. It's the awakening of a man who no longer confuses empathy with self-effacement. And from that moment on, your compassion becomes a sword, not a chain. It is the shift that Carl Jung warned us about, the moment when empaths stop being prey and start becoming sovereign. Comment below. I am starting to become sovereign. 5. Carl Jung's shadow integration techniques empower empaths. For empaths, this truth hits especially hard. You've likely spent your life feeling everything so deeply, absorbing the emotions of others like a sponge, often mistaking their pain for your purpose. But what happens when the empath finally sees the truth? What happens when you realize that what you've been calling compassion was often self-abandonment disguised as love? This is where Jung's powerful shadow integration techniques come in, not as abstract theories, but as tools for real spiritual growth. Let's talk about them in plain language. The mirror technique means looking at the people who trigger you the most and asking, what part of myself am I seeing in them? That frustrating coworker, that manipulative partner, they might be reflecting a disowned part of you back to yourself. Then there's withdrawing projections, which is about no longer blaming others for what you've refused to face in yourself. You take your power back, not by pointing fingers, but by asking better questions like, why did I allow that behavior? Or, what part of me still needed validation from someone who couldn't give it? That's where the sacred no becomes a spiritual weapon, not a selfish act. It's the moment when you realize you don't have to explain your boundaries to people who were never going to honor them anyway. And emotional Aikido. Oh, that's a beautiful one. It's the art of energetically stepping aside, redirecting the chaos someone throws at you, and keeping your center intact. You don't have to fight every storm when you remember you are the sky. Now let me ask you something. When was the last time you said no and meant it, not from anger, but from clarity? When was the last time you stopped trying to fix someone and started healing yourself? These moments are not just emotional breakthroughs. They're signs of spiritual maturity. In today's fast-paced world, especially with social media constantly telling us to be everything for everyone, these techniques are more than helpful. They're essential. You may think spirituality is all light and peace, but the real work is gritty. It's owning your darkness, integrating your shadow, and walking away from people who only love the parts of you that don't ask for anything. So here's a story. I once knew a man who spent over 10 years trying to rescue a narcissistic partner. Every time she blamed him, lied to him, or confused him, he thought, if I only love her more, she will change. It wasn't until he discovered Jung's mirroring that he realized she was mirroring his own childhood wounds, his fear of abandonment, his longing for approval. Then he stopped being cold. He became clear. And in that clarity, he left not in hatred, but in peace. That's the power shift Jung was talking about. Not an explosive rage, but a quiet, steady presence that narcissists can no longer manipulate. Because once the empath awakens, once they embrace their darkness and embrace the truth, they become untouchable. That's not just healing, that's sovereignty. So I'll leave you with this. If any of this resonates with you, it's no coincidence. It is your soul calling you to grow. Don't ignore it. Start with a question. What am I hiding within myself? Your answer can change your entire life. This is what true spirituality looks like. Not perfection, but the power that comes from self-awareness. And that, my friend, is the beginning of your true spiritual growth. Comment below. I am ready for this journey. 6. Individuation makes empaths psychologically invulnerable. There comes a powerful turning point in the life of every empath, one that Carl Jung called individuation. It's not just some lofty psychological concept buried in textbooks. No, this is a spiritual awakening. It's the moment when you, the empath, no longer live as a mirror to other people's pain, but as a reflection of your own inner wholeness. Through the deep and often uncomfortable process of shadow work, where you face the darker parts of yourself that you've repressed or denied, you begin to reclaim your fragmented self. You stop absorbing everyone else's emotional chaos, and instead, you embody emotional sovereignty. Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And when empaths finally do this, when they stare into their own psychological abyss and integrate what they find, they become invulnerable, not in a cold, armored way, but in a grounded, spiritually wise way that radiates peace and clarity. You see, narcissists don't just manipulate randomly. They feed on emotional wounds, especially the ones tied to unworthiness, people-pleasing, and unresolved guilt. But once you reach individuation, those wounds are no longer bleeding. There's nothing left to hook into. The narcissist's old tactics, gaslighting, guilt trips, and emotional baiting suddenly fall flat. It's like trying to dig into concrete with a spoon. Why? Because you've healed. And here's the twist. When you heal, you don't just become immune to toxic people, you stop attracting them altogether. Your frequency changes. You go from radiating the energy of "please love me" to "I love myself deeply, and I choose who gets access to me." That's not arrogance. That's self-respect, born from spiritual wisdom. So let me ask you, what parts of yourself have you been avoiding in the name of being nice, helpful, or accommodating? What pieces of your truth have you silenced to keep others comfortable? And more importantly, what would happen if you stopped doing that? Would you finally become the person you were always meant to be? Not just a kind soul, but a powerful one? Jung believed that individuation is the path to becoming your true self, not the persona you wear for acceptance, but the deep, authentic being beneath the surface. And when you reach that place, narcissists don't just fear you, they can't even see you anymore. You've risen to a level where their drama simply can't survive. Your energy no longer feeds their ego. You've become, in essence, spiritually untouchable. So if you're an empath, know this: you were never meant to stay broken, drained, or endlessly forgiving. You were meant to awaken. And when you do, when you finally stop trying to fix others and start integrating yourself, you don't lose your empathy. You refine it. You reclaim it. And that's when everything shifts. You're no longer the one who bends. You're the one who stands. And silently, powerfully, you teach others how to rise too. If this resonates with you, consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell. Your journey to stoic self-mastery and victory continues with each lesson. 7. Integrated empaths trigger supply confusion in narcissists. Narcissists thrive on reaction. Their entire ego structure feeds off what psychology calls narcissistic supply, the emotional upheaval they trigger in others to feel in control, superior, and relevant. But something incredible happens when an empath, after years of emotional exhaustion, finally becomes spiritually integrated. That means no longer absorbing everyone's pain, no longer explaining themselves, and no longer chasing peace in all the wrong places. Instead of reacting with confusion, tears, or anger, the empath responds with silence, with stillness, with spiritual clarity. This throws the narcissist into what we call supply confusion, a psychological void where their manipulative tactics like gaslighting, guilt-tripping, and emotional baiting suddenly fall flat. It's not because the empath has become cold or cruel, but because they've awakened. Through deep spiritual awakening, the empath has started choosing peace over people-pleasing, boundaries over chaos, and awareness over emotional reactivity. This internal shift, this newfound calm and detachment, renders the narcissist powerless because they can no longer access the empath's emotional dashboard. The narcissist senses something's changed, but can't quite name it because this transformation isn't visible, it's energetic. The empath becomes psychologically invisible to their predatory instincts, much like turning off a frequency they were once tuned into. And in that moment, a role reversal begins. The narcissist, who once dominated the emotional terrain, is now left unsettled, confused, and even frightened not of the empath's aggression, but of their serenity. You see, serenity is a spiritual power that disrupts dysfunction. So let me ask you directly, have you ever experienced the peace that comes from no longer needing to explain yourself? Have you ever watched someone become unguarded not by your words, but by your absence? That's the power Jung was referring to when he talked about individuation, the sacred process of becoming whole. This is more than just emotional power, it's spiritual power. And in today's world, where manipulation is hidden behind seduction and control disguised as love, this kind of awakening is not only helpful, it's essential. So to all the men listening, if you're feeling drained, confused, or doubting your own reality around toxic dynamics, know that your peace is your greatest defense. Your boundaries are sacred. And when you become integrated, you are no longer just surviving emotional turmoil, you are rewriting the rules of relationship. That is not a weakness. That is spiritual power in its highest masculine form. And it is time we talked about it. Comment below. I am the highest spiritual power. 8. Empaths who heal themselves help heal the world. When you start healing yourself, something extraordinary happens, not just within you, but around you. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And that quote rings especially true for empaths. You, as an empath, carry a deep sensitivity that connects you to the emotional undercurrents of the world, often feeling the pain of others as if it were your own. But what if I told you that your healing journey doesn't just belong to you? Jung believed that when an individual undergoes personal transformation, it ripples through the collective unconscious, a shared layer of the human psyche that binds us all. So, when you finally confront your inner wounds, your unprocessed grief, your buried anger, your fear of rejection, you're not just healing yourself. You're dissolving the emotional knots of generations. That's the spiritual power you carry. When you begin to integrate your shadow, the parts of yourself you were told to hide, you stop living in reaction and start living in truth. You no longer seek validation through performance. You simply become a presence, a lighthouse, a guide for those still lost in the fog of their own self-denial. This is what spiritual growth looks like. It's messy, it's raw, and yet it's the most beautiful form of leadership you could ever embody. Think about it this way. Have you ever met someone whose calm energy just made you feel safe without them saying a word? That's not luck. That's inner work. I know a woman named Sarah, a former people pleaser who was constantly drained by toxic relationships. She always thought being kind meant sacrificing herself. But after she went through a season of therapy, journaling, and deep self-reflection, something shifted. She no longer tolerated emotional manipulation. She started saying no without guilt. And strangely, people around her began to change too. Some grew with her, others fell away. But what remained was her unwavering peace. Sarah didn't set out to change the world. She just chose to stop betraying herself. And that alone was enough to inspire change in her family, her workplace, even her circle of friends. That's the ripple effect Jung was pointing to. So I ask you, what part of yourself have you been afraid to face? What pain are you still carrying that's not even yours to begin with? The moment you dare to look at it with compassion instead of shame, you begin the sacred process of transmutation, turning your wounds into wisdom. In today's chaotic world, the real revolution isn't loud or violent. It's spiritual. It begins in the quiet, tender choice to come home to yourself. That's how empaths, those who've been dismissed, drained, and discarded, rise up not with fury, but with clarity. And that's a power narcissists will never understand. The lesson is simple, but profound. Your personal healing is a sacred act of service. By choosing your truth, you make space for others to do the same. By walking your spiritual path with honesty and courage, you help lift the collective vibration of the world. So the next time you feel like your growth is slow or insignificant, remember every boundary you set, every wound you heal, every shadow you integrate is a light switched on in the darkness of the human condition. Keep going, because when an empath heals, the world shifts. And that, my friend, is the true essence of spirituality. What part of this message resonates with you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear how this has shaped your journey. As we've explored today, the moment an empath reclaims their power is the moment the game changes forever. Carl Jung's insights reveal that true strength doesn't come from fighting back, but from becoming conscious, grounded, and authentic. When you embrace your shadow and stand in your truth, narcissists no longer have control over you. They vanish, not because you turned hard, but because you turned whole. If this message spoke to your soul, take a moment to reflect. How will you start applying this in your own life? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. And if you'd like to support spiritual wisdom further, leaving a super thanks below helps keep this light shining.